It was supposed to be just another property inspection, a cold, crumbling house scheduled for demolition. But when the city workers forced the rusted door open, they weren't prepared for what waited inside. Amidst the rot, the decay, and the silence that clung to every inch of the abandoned home, something was scratched into the wall. Not graffiti, not random vandalism, just 5 deep, ragged letters, etched with trembling hands. A name, and at the base of the wall, crumpled and lifeless, lay the body of a woman long dead. Welcome to True Crime Hub, where we dive deep into the chilling and unexplained. In this 50-part series, we unravel a mystery that begins with a carved name and ends in a descent into obsession, betrayal, and death. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay until the end, because every part of this case will leave you wondering, what would you do in her place? On July 5, 2018, demolition teams were assigned to a row of abandoned homes in a dying neighborhood of Dayton, Ohio. The house on 228, Briarwood Lane, had been vacant for nearly 5 years. The city believed it to be structurally unsound and empty. But inside, in the dark corner of the upstairs bedroom, a body had gone unnoticed for what experts believed could have been months. The victim, Melissa Graves, a 32-year-old former teacher, missing for over 14 months. Her hands were bruised, her fingers were blooded, and behind her body, scrawled deeply into the faded drywall, was one name: Ethan. Melissa and Graves was not the type of person who just vanished. A respected English teacher at Jefferson High, beloved by her students, regularly volunteered at shelters and church events. Described by friends as deeply empathetic, almost to a fault. She lived a quiet life, worked hard, had dreams of publishing a children's book. A sister, Amanda, who she was extremely close to. No enemies, no secrets, or so everyone believed. But in April 2017, Melissa stopped responding to calls. Missed work, never picked up her last paycheck, no activity on her bank card. Her small apartment had been emptied, no forced entry, no signs of struggle, just gone. Amanda Graves filed a missing persons report. But without signs of foul play, the case stalled quickly. Until now. In an interview, Amanda Graves says they told me she was probably depressed, that maybe she needed a break. But I knew something was wrong. She would never just disappear like that. The story continues. The discovery of Melissa's body would reignite the cold case. But that name carved into the wall, Ethan, was the spark that blew everything open. The way her fingers were broken told investigators one thing: Melissa had carved that name herself, using a splintered piece of wood from the broken bed frame. The drywall was thin, but the etching went deep. She had to dig again and again, pressing with all her strength. Why, in her final moments, would she waste her last energy on 5 letters? Ethan. No last name. No context. The investigators had their first lead. It took Amanda less than 10 minutes to tell them who she believed it was. Ethan Maddox. A name Amanda hadn't heard in over a year. Melissa had dated him, briefly. He wasn't like her. Not kind. Not gentle. He was charming at first, but there was something underneath. I always felt like he was watching her too closely. But Ethan had no criminal record. No history of violence. He was successful, a software engineer who lived 3 cities over. The relationship, Amanda recalled, ended abruptly. Melissa refused to talk about it. Now investigators had a name, and more questions than answers. Police contacted Ethan Maddox for a voluntary interview. He seemed cooperative, polite, even surprised to hear Melissa's name. I hadn't seen her in over a year, he claimed. She ended things, just ghosted me. But Melissa's sister told a different story. She was terrified to break it off. Said he knew things about her, things no one else should have known. Melissa had confided in Amanda that Ethan had started tracking her, digitally. Her phone, her location, even her computer at school. She'd changed passwords, replaced devices, even moved once without telling him. But somehow, he always found her. Investigators subpoenaed Ethan's devices. Nothing damning surfaced. No threatening texts. No obvious spyware. Still, Amanda remained convinced. He broke her. Not just emotionally. He dismantled her sense of safety. Was that what drove Melissa to that house, to isolation? Or did Ethan bring her there? The line between victim and suspect was starting to blur. The house on 228, Briarwood Lane, had a history of its own. Once a rental property, its last tenant moved out in early 2017. Melissa's body was found in the upstairs bedroom, the only room with a partially boarded window. She had clearly been there for weeks. But how did she end up there? The key to the front door was missing. There were no signs of forced entry. No signs of someone else staying there. Yet nearby workers remembered seeing a figure, a woman, looking out the upstairs window at night. They thought it was a squatter. No one reported it. Then came the most disturbing clue. Tucked inside the closet, behind a loose panel, police found a burned cell phone. Melissa's. The SIM card was destroyed, but the storage chip partially intact. What they recovered changed everything. Photos of her, crying, in the very room she died in, taken over several days. She didn't carve Ethan's name on impulse. She carved it as a message. Further into the phone's storage, digital forensics uncovered something even more chilling. Melissa had recorded voice memos, not to report her location, but to document what was happening. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. Her voice was weak, frightened. She described how someone lured her to the house, posing as a potential renter for a tutoring side job. She described hearing locks click behind her. She described the windows being boarded after she was already inside. It's him. It's Ethan. He said if I ever left him again, he'd make sure no one ever found me. The audio ended abruptly. There were 4 memos. The last one was just static and heavy breathing. This wasn't just a missing person. This was abduction, psychological torture, and murder. Investigators expanded their digital probe. If Ethan had gone to such lengths to trap Melissa, there had to be a trail. Buried in Melissa's laptop, previously dismissed by forensics, was a backup email account. One she created under a pseudonym. In it were emails to herself. Logs. Entries like, "He was outside the cafe again. My car alarm went off at 3 a.m. I'm scared he cloned my keys." One email in particular stood out. "If something happens to me, it was Ethan. I don't care what he says. He knows how to hide things. Please, believe me." It was dated 2 weeks before she vanished. With mounting circumstantial evidence, detectives confronted Ethan again. He denied everything. Claimed Melissa was paranoid. Claimed she was mentally unwell. But during the time of Melissa's disappearance, Ethan had no clear alibi. His phone was off-grid. GPS data wiped. He'd taken time off work, citing a family emergency. Still, without a witness or physical evidence tying him directly to the house, prosecutors hesitated. But Amanda wouldn't. She took to social media, started a campaign, #Justice for Melissa. And slowly, the cracks began to show. A break came when one of Ethan's former co-workers contacted the police anonymously. She described Ethan as obsessive, angry, especially after his breakup with Melissa. He used to brag about his ability to hack anyone's life. Phones, computers, even Wi-Fi routers. Said he could erase a person if he wanted. The woman agreed to go on record. That statement reopened the investigation. Subpoenas were issued again. This time, deeper digital forensic dives would follow. But time was running out. The statute of limitations on lesser charges was approaching. And then came one more discovery. Inside a crawl space of the Briarwood home, behind insulation and rotting wood, a hidden camera was found. Its battery long dead, but the SD card intact. On it, over 6 hours of grainy footage. Melissa, crying, sitting on the floor, whispering to herself. And one shadow, tall, male, entering the frame, only briefly, but long enough to confirm everything. She wasn't alone. Ethan had been there. He hadn't just stalked her. He hadn't just abducted her. He had watched. We follow the trial, the breaking point, and the dark secrets Ethan never meant for anyone to find. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Someone out there needs to hear Melissa's story. Because this isn't just about what happened to her. It's about how desperation can become a weapon, and how one final act of defiance carved the truth into the world. The footage from the hidden camera was the smoking gun investigators had hoped for. While the shadowy figure's face wasn't entirely clear, analysts confirmed through frame-by-frame breakdowns that the height, build, and clothing matched Ethan Maddox's known description and wardrobe from that period. With new digital evidence, the case was formally reopened. Melissa's death was reclassified, from unexplained death to homicide by confinement and psychological torment. Prosecutors now had enough to move forward, but the case was delicate. The defense would argue ambiguity. The footage didn't show physical harm. No fingerprints. No DNA. Still, Ethan was arrested in October 2019 on charges of unlawful imprisonment, stalking, and second-degree murder. The trial would be one of the most watched in the state that year. Ethan Maddox walked into court like a man untouched. He wore a navy blue suit. He smiled politely to the press. But Amanda Graves sat in the front row, gripping a photo of her sister so tightly the frame cracked in her hand. The prosecution opened with the carved name, Ethan, arguing that in Melissa's last moments, she chose to name her killer. The defense fired back: trauma-induced hallucination, unstable mental state, and lack of forensic evidence. But then the tapes played. Melissa's voice echoed through the courtroom. He said no one would find me. I think he's going to hurt me. He won't let me leave. Jurors wept. Even the judge asked for a recess. But this case was far from over. It was a risky move, but Ethan took the stand. He portrayed himself as a man haunted by a woman's obsession. Claimed Melissa followed him, hacked his accounts, sent emails to herself from spoofed addresses. Said she faked it all. I ended the relationship when I realized she was mentally ill. I didn't have the heart to report her. He shed a tear. Said he hoped she found peace. But it wasn't convincing. Especially not after Amanda's testimony. Amanda Graves took the stand with fire in her voice. She detailed years of fear Melissa endured. The move, the paranoia, the bruises, and the whispered voicemails from Melissa that no one had yet heard publicly. Then a voicemail audio played. It says Amanda is watching again. I don't know how, but he knows where I am. The jury sat in stunned silence. The judge ruled Amanda's account admissible under victim context. Public sentiment shifted rapidly. Social media erupted again, this time with fire. #he did it, #justice for Melissa. Prosecutors introduced damning new evidence from the FBI's cyber unit. Metadata recovered from Ethan's home server showed Melissa's phone was remotely pinged dozens of times, even after she changed devices. The logs showed login attempts on her school email from an IP address linked to Ethan's home Wi-Fi. He had been spying. He hadn't just followed her physically. He lived inside her digital life, trapped her in a prison of paranoia. This wasn't just stalking. This was possession. The defense cracked when Ethan's ex-girlfriend, before Melissa, came forward. She testified, tearfully, about eerily similar behavior. After I left him, I got anonymous emails. I moved across the state. He still found me. I filed reports, but they led nowhere. I thought maybe I was going crazy. Patterns of abuse, isolation, technological manipulation. The prosecution painted Ethan not as a momentary aggressor, but a serial predator who used intelligence, not violence, to dominate. One message, dated 2 days before Clara's death, played static for 11 seconds. Then, "Do you see me now?" The voice was warped, male, and slow. When played backwards, it revealed a chilling phrase. "He's in the walls." He always was. Audio analysts ran the clip through voice comparison software. It didn't match anyone in the Sinclair family, but it did match an audio sample from an urban legend podcast episode recorded in 2003, about a ghost named Liam who haunted a boarding school in Maine. Same voice, same cadence. Coincidence or connection? In a final twist, Clara's autopsy, revisited after digital enhancement techniques improved, revealed faint ink under the epidermal layer of her left palm. When illuminated with ultraviolet light, a single word became visible. Run. Below it, numbers, 12.39.5.18. It wasn't a date, but it was a cipher. Converted to letters, it spelled LIAM. Clara had embedded his name inside herself, beneath the skin, as if to ensure he could never be forgotten. But was it a cry for help, or a final surrender? The blueprints revealed something deeply unsettling. Beneath the house, a sealed-off sub-basement. No permit, no record, just a void hidden beneath the foundations. The new homeowner had never heard of it. Rachel's parents claimed they didn't know it existed. But the police couldn't ignore the architectural anomaly. A team was brought in to excavate the concrete slab. What they found wasn't just shocking, it was horrifying. Beneath layers of soil and brick was a tiny, soundproofed room with thick walls and no windows. In it, they discovered scratch marks on the walls, aged strands of hair, and the remnants of a rusted chain. The theory changed instantly. What if Rachel had been kept here, trapped, for longer than anyone imagined? The missing 2 days from the autopsy, the malnourishment, the psychological state described. It all pointed to prolonged captivity. But by whom? And why had she been returned to the main floor before her death, only to leave behind a final, carved message. Rachel had been seeing a school psychologist, Dr. Lydia Crane, in the weeks before her death. Her notes were protected by privacy laws, but under a court order, they were released to investigators. What they revealed was a girl spiraling into paranoia. Dr. Crane wrote, "Rachel frequently expresses fear of being watched. She refuses to speak of her home environment and flinches at the sound of male voices. She once whispered, 'He said no one will believe me if I tell.'" The he was never identified. But Rachel had referred to a man, not her father, not her brother. Someone else. Was this the same man whose name she etched into the wall? A predator embedded within her daily life? Or worse, someone the family had knowingly harbored? Detectives turned their focus to the inner circle of the Dawson family, extended relatives, old family friends, past tenants. One name surfaced again and again, Victor Raines. Victor had been a close friend of Rachel's uncle. He stayed with the family several times in Rachel's early years and was known to be overly familiar with her. But he vanished from the family's life abruptly 5 years prior. The official story was that he moved away for work. But a neighbor recalled a fight, screaming, threats, and the sound of glass breaking. The police obtained a warrant to track Victor down. He was now living 3 states away, off the grid, in a trailer near the woods. When questioned, Victor was visibly shaken. He denied everything, until the photo. Among the items discovered in the crawl space was a Polaroid. Rachel, no older than 8, standing stiffly next to Victor. Her face pale, forced. His hand gripped her shoulder tightly. It wasn't just inappropriate, it was chilling. Victor went pale when he saw it. He admitted to visiting often but denied ever hurting her. The detectives pressed harder. Eventually, Victor broke. He admitted that Rachel confided in him once, about someone in the house. Someone worse than the monsters in movies, as she put it. But Victor said he didn't believe her. He thought she was acting out. So he left. His guilt was palpable. But was he more than just a silent bystander? In an attic box labeled Christmas decorations, police uncovered a journal. It was hidden beneath layers of tinsel and fake snow. The handwriting was unmistakably Rachel's. In it, she described dreams, except they didn't sound like dreams. She wrote of being locked in the dark place, of him coming at night, and of screaming until her voice broke. Most haunting was a page titled, "What I'll Do If I'm Gone." It included a list. 1. Leave a sign. 2. His name. 3. Make them look here. The wall message made sense now. Rachel didn't just die. She made sure her death spoke louder than any scream. Under mounting pressure, Rachel's mother, Elaine, sat down with investigators. What started as quiet sobs turned into full-throated wailing. Then, a bombshell confession. "I knew she was scared of him," Elaine said. "I just didn't know what to do. He was family. We all made a pact. It was easier to believe she was overreacting than face the truth." The detectives froze. "Who?" they asked. Elaine whispered a name. Not Victor. Not the father. It was someone no one had suspected. David Dawson. Rachel's uncle. Elaine's brother. The one who moved into the guest house after losing his job. The one always around. Always helpful. Always watching. David had no criminal record. No history of violence. But he had full access to the house, and Rachel's behavioral issues escalated shortly after he moved in. When confronted, David laughed. "You think I did something to that little brat?" She was always dramatic. But beneath the bravado was panic. Police searched his old laptop, discarded in a garage sale. What they found made everyone sick. Hundreds of hidden files. Videos. Photos. Some of Rachel. Some of other girls. Secretly recorded. Many taken through holes drilled in bedroom and bathroom walls. David was arrested on the spot. But what stunned police most was a folder labeled insurance. Inside, scanned pages from Rachel's diary. She hadn't just written her fears. She had hidden copies all over the house. And David found them. He knew she was preparing to expose him. The timeline came together like shattered glass reassembled. David discovered Rachel's latest diary entry. She was ready to tell someone. He waited until everyone was asleep. He used the secret basement. But Rachel fought back. She escaped, crawled up the vents, found the wall, used her last strength to carve his name, then collapsed. It was too late to save her, but not too late to expose him. David Dawson was charged with murder, kidnapping, and possession of illicit materials. He pled guilty to avoid a trial. The community was rocked. Rachel's name became a rallying cry for abuse victims silenced by fear. The carved name on the wall was preserved behind glass. A reminder, a warning, a voice that refused to be erased. The room was darker than before, or maybe it just felt that way. Mark stared at the photo pinned to the wall with a rusted nail. Sarah's eyes seemed to follow him, haunting him. Detective Myra's latest theory gnawed at the back of his mind. What if the name carved in the wall wasn't meant to accuse him, but to save him? This reframing shifted everything. As he returned to the crawl space, flashlight trembling in his grip, Mark found another carving. Faint, scratched with what must have been fingernails. The jury looked shaken. The prosecution stood strong. Melissa carved a name into the wall. Not for attention, not for drama. She carved it because she wanted the world to know. He did this. He locked her away and walked free. Until now. The defense attempted to sow doubt. There is no definitive proof. Only suspicion. Only emotion. But emotion, in this case, was powerful. Melissa's name was no longer just a headline. It was a battle cry. On a cold January morning, the jury returned. Guilty. On all counts: stalking, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and second-degree murder. Ethan Maddox was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The courtroom erupted in quiet sobs. Amanda, clutching her sister's diary, whispered. She didn't die in vain. Melissa's final message, the one carved with her last strength, had been heard. The case spurred major changes in Ohio. Melissa's law was passed 6 months later, improving protections for victims of cyberstalking and psychological harassment. Schools began training educators to recognize digital abuse. Law enforcement received grants to better track digital stalking. Amanda founded the Carved Voice Project, a nonprofit dedicated to helping victims leave abusive digital relationships. Melissa's story became more than just a tragedy. It became a movement. In the quiet of her childhood home, Amanda hung the final photo of Melissa, laughing, bright-eyed, holding a journal. She never stopped teaching, Amanda said. Even in her last breath, she was writing a lesson. And now you've heard it too. But this story isn't over. In the next parts, we investigate how Ethan learned to manipulate so expertly, and the chilling background that may have shaped his methods. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. A shadow flitted across the frame in the upper corridor, right outside Clara's bedroom, at precisely 3:08 a.m., the same time neighbors claimed they heard a distant scream the night she died. Detective Harlow replayed it again and again. The timestamp didn't lie. No one was supposed to be in that hallway. No one, but Clara. This was from a security camera hidden in the antique grandfather clock just outside her room, installed years ago during a string of burglaries in the neighborhood. It hadn't been checked in ages, forgotten even by the family. But now it showed something terrifying. The shape paused outside Clara's door. Then, suddenly, a hand, almost translucent, brushed against the wall. The same wall where her final message was later carved, Liam. Harlow enlarged the frame, but no face could be discerned. He called in a forensic video specialist. The specialist reviewed the tape for hours, slowed it, zoomed in, and reversed the footage. Eventually, he turned to Harlow and said, "This isn't a glitch. Whatever that was, it was there." Was Clara reaching out from beyond the grave? Or was someone playing a cruel game, mocking them with a ghost they couldn't catch? While reviewing blueprints of the Sinclair property for structural anomalies, an intern in the records department stumbled upon something odd. The original construction schematics from 1894 showed only one basement. But a secondary set, dated 1922, outlined a sealed sublevel, buried beneath the main cellar. It didn't appear in any modern inspection reports. Why would it be hidden? A team was dispatched to the house. Beneath a rotting wooden shelf in the wine cellar, they found a small iron ring embedded into the floor. When pulled, a trapdoor groaned open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. The air was stale. The walls were lined with old bricks and patches of peeling wallpaper. At the far end of the hidden chamber was a single chair facing a wall, and above it, freshly carved words. "You found me." The name Liam was etched repeatedly across the bricks. But the kicker, forensics determined the carvings were less than a month old. Dr. Melanie Strauss had treated Clara during the last 2 years of her life. A quiet woman, meticulous in her record-keeping, Dr. Strauss had never spoken publicly about her client. But her private journal told another story. "I believe Clara is being manipulated. She describes vivid dreams where a man whispers to her while she sleeps, someone named Liam. But she insists they are not dreams. She calls them memories, the journal read. Clara had confided that Liam once saved her from drowning as a child, though there were no records of such an incident. She claimed Liam was her protector and her tormentor. I fear Liam is not a real person, Strauss wrote. I fear he is something Clara has conjured to cope with or hide from. But the final journal entry was what sent chills down Harlow's spine. Clara asked if I'd ever carved a name into a wall to be remembered. I said no. She smiled and said, "Then you'll forget me too." A new tip came from a hiker who frequented the trail near the Sinclair's estate. He claimed to have found a crumpled, weather-stained letter inside a rusted tin box beneath a hollow tree. It was addressed to whomever finds me. Inside, written in shaky penmanship, he watches from the walls. He speaks in the quiet. I loved him once, but now I'm scared. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. Please tell them Liam isn't who they think. He wears a different face now. One you trust. The letter was signed. C. Sinclair. But the writing style didn't match Clara's. Handwriting analysis suggested it belonged to Madeline Sinclair, Clara's grandmother, presumed to have died of natural causes decades ago. So what was her connection to Liam? Was he a figure passed down through generations? Or a curse that refused to die? When the Sinclair estate caught fire 2 weeks after the letter was found, everyone assumed it was arson, likely someone trying to bury secrets. But when investigators pored over drone footage from the blaze, something peculiar stood out. In the center of the roof, as the flames roared, a shadow emerged, clear as day. A male figure, arms outstretched, stood still in the inferno. Firefighters found no body, but the temperature in that exact area was lower than the rest of the blaze. And on a scorched beam, still intact, 3 words had been etched with a blade. She chose me. It was unmistakable. The handwriting matched the message Clara had carved. So who had she chosen? Who, or what, was Liam? Genealogical research finally cracked something wide open. Clara's family tree had always seemed pristine, wealthy, influential, and well-documented. But buried in a footnote of a probate record from 1953 was a name never before mentioned in family documents. Liam E. Sinclair, listed as the firstborn son of William and Margaret Sinclair. He had died, allegedly, in an accidental fall at the age of 12. But no death certificate existed. Local newspaper archives showed no obituary, no burial records, no autopsy. Save him. A tremor ran through him. He hadn't killed Sarah, but someone had, and she was trying to protect someone before she died. The implications were staggering. Who was she trying to save? Was it him, or someone else entirely? Myra cross-referenced Sarah's old emails. A name kept coming up. Jeremy. A foster brother Mark had barely mentioned. The more they dug, the more Jeremy appeared like a shadow in their lives, present, watchful, and increasingly obsessive. When they visited the group home Sarah once lived in, the caretakers grew silent at Jeremy's name. Quiet, but strange, one finally admitted. Myra's gut twisted. Jeremy had disappeared shortly after Sarah's death. Back in the attic, Myra found a showbox buried in insulation. Inside, Polaroids of Sarah. Some candid, others clearly taken without her knowledge. On the back of one, scrawled in red ink, "She was mine." Jeremy's last known address led to a rural shack, forgotten by time and tangled in weeds. No electricity. Inside, the walls were plastered with drawings of Sarah, childish, distorted, and growing darker over time. In the corner sat a diary. Myra hesitated before opening it. The entries were erratic. She chose him. She forgot me. They never see me. But I watch. She screamed my name. Myra turned cold. Jeremy had been watching, lurking in the periphery. And he'd snapped. Myra confronted Mark. The news crushed him. He remembered Jeremy, a quiet boy who clung to Sarah like a shadow. Sarah once said, "He scares me sometimes. Like his pretending to be a brother." Mark broke down. "I thought I was the monster." "You weren't," Myra said gently. "You were her shield. That's why she carved your name. To point us to the one who wasn't you." Mark wept. Not just for Sarah, but for the years spent believing he was her killer. They found Jeremy 2 states away, living under a false name. When confronted, he didn't resist. He simply said, "I loved her too much." In court, his confession chilled everyone. She wasn't supposed to leave me. But she wanted him. So I made sure she couldn't have anyone. He described the attic, the fight, the moment Sarah realized what was happening. How she begged him to stop. How she used her last strength to carve Mark's name, because she knew Jeremy hated him. It would ensure the truth would eventually surface. Jeremy was sentenced to life without parole. The courtroom was silent as Mark delivered his victim impact statement. I lived in the shadow of a lie for years. Sarah's last act saved me, and you tried to bury that. Myra watched the gallery, noting the quiet tears of those who had doubted Mark. Outside, Mark looked up at the sky. I hear her again. Not screaming, just peaceful. In the months that followed, Myra and Mark worked together to start a foundation. Carved light, supporting those falsely accused, especially in domestic abuse cases. Sarah's story became a beacon. Her desperate final act, scratching truth into plaster, sparked hope for others. A documentary followed, then national attention. The attic became a preserved site, silent, solemn, and sacred. 1 year later, Myra returned alone. She traced the carvings again. The room felt lighter now, no longer heavy with dread. She was trying to protect someone. Myra whispered to the empty space. Then she noticed a new carving, faint but recent. Thank you. Had Mark returned? Or someone else touched by the case? Either way, it was closure. Not just for Sarah, but for Myra too. The final court documents were sealed, the last appeals denied. Jeremy would never walk free. Mark moved across the country, starting over. Sometimes, he still traced her name on paper, remembering her laughter. Myra continued working cold cases. But none ever haunted her like this one. None ever whispered through walls, through blood, through time. And yet, Sarah's message echoed. She carved his name, not in vengeance, but in love. This was more than a story of a murder. It was a story of trauma, of misplaced guilt, and of truth clawing its way through darkness. Sarah's voice, though silenced, screamed louder than ever through her final act. Her name, and his, forever bound by desperation and devotion. To our True Crime Hub viewers, if you found this story as powerful and heartbreaking as we did, share it. Someone out there might need to hear it. Candle #like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more deep dives into true cases that still echo in hearts and headlines. This was why she carved his name into the wall before dying. Stay curious, stay compassionate, and remember, every wall holds a story.